Who is the SVS SB3000 or Evolution really for? Who might want to pass on it? And does its price make sense for someone just looking to upgrade their movie nights or gaming sessions? That's the question that keeps popping up whenever I see a new subwoofer on the market, especially one that promises the most advanced DSP and a flat-edge split voice coil. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. So let's dig into why you might end up either loving or hating this piece of kit. First off, if you're the kind of person who has already spent a decent chunk on a solid floor-standing speaker system and you're now hearing a muddy bass that just doesn't cut through dialogue, the SB3000 could actually be the missing link. It's a sealed box sub, which means the bass is tight, fast, and less boomy than a ported design. That makes it forgiving in small to medium rooms where a ported cabinet would slam the walls and leave you with a lot of unwanted vibration. On the flip side, if you're living in a huge home theater space and you want that earth-shaking low-frequency rumble during explosions, a sealed unit might feel a bit restrained. In that scenario, a larger ported sub or a dual sub configuration would probably give you the punch you're after. What really sets the SB3000 apart is the driver. SVS calls it a high-excursion long-throw driver, and the engineering behind the flat-edge split voice coil does matter when you're trying to push a lot of air without sacrificing control. In real-world terms, I've heard folks describe the bass as authoritative without being overwhelming. That's the sweet spot for a living room setup where you want your movies to feel cinematic without the neighbors complaining about the floor shaking. The driver's ability to move more air at lower distortion translates into a bass response that stays clean even when you crank the volume to 85 dB in a 12-foot room. Now, about that DSP. Most subwoofers today come with some sort of digital signal processing, but SVS claims this is the most advanced they've ever put into a unit. What that looks like in practice is an auto room EQ that listens to your room's acoustic profile, applies corrective filters, and then lets you fine-tune the result from a smartphone app. If you've ever tried to manually dial in the sub's phase, crossover, and volume and ended up with a boom-no-boom dilemma, the auto EQ can save a lot of headaches. I've tested the app on a typical suburban basement with concrete walls and a standard carpet. The preset EQ reduced the muddy low-mid region by about 3 dB, which made dialogue clearer during action scenes. That's a real benefit you can notice without pulling out a microphone and measuring SPL. But there are hidden trade-offs. The sealed design means the SB3000's maximum output is lower than a comparable ported model of the same size. In a quiet night at home, you'll probably never hit that ceiling, but if you plan on using the sub for large-scale parties or as part of an immersive VR setup, you might find yourself hitting the soft clipping point sooner than expected. The amp inside the sub is definitely powerful for its class, yet that power is being used to push air in a relatively compact enclosure. Some reviewers have mentioned that deep rumble on the 20 Hz end feels a touch less pronounced compared to a 12-inch ported sibling, especially when you're sitting farther than 6 feet from the sub. For most listeners, that's a minor nuance, but it's worth keeping in mind if you're chasing the absolute deepest bass. Another practical consideration is the size and placement flexibility. The SB3000 is a 12-inch sealed box that measures about 16 inches tall, 15 inches wide, and 15 inches deep. That makes it fit nicely under a standard TV stand or beside a bookshelf. However, the sealed design also means you can't tune the low-frequency roll-off by adding an external port or changing the enclosure volume. Everything is baked in. If you're a DI enthusiast who likes to experiment with cabinet modifications, you'll find that limited. The good news is the built-in DSP does a lot of the heavy lifting for you, so you don't need to become a subwoofer wizard to get decent performance. Who should definitely consider buying the SB3000? If you already own a decent main speaker pair, whether they're floor-standing towers or bookshelf units, and you feel the low end is thin or lacking impact, this sub will fill that gap without overwhelming the room. It's also a solid pick for gamers who rely on precise, fast bass cues for weapon impacts or environmental feedback. The sealed design keeps the response tight, so you won't get the boomy lag you sometimes hear with larger ported units. Home theater owners with a room size under 250 square feet will appreciate the convenience of the auto EQ and app control, especially if they don't want to spend hours tweaking crossover points. Who might want to skip it? If you live in a large open-plan space, are building a dedicated home theater dedicated room.